Life is for the living. Death is for dead. Let life be their music, and death a note unsaid. Langston Hughes.
Hell, March 13th, 1919. Esteemed mortal of New Orleans. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe smeared with the blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. If you wish, you may tell the police to be careful not to rile me. Of course, I am a reasonable spirit. I take no offense at the way they've conducted their investigations in the past. In fact, they have been so utterly stupid as to not only amuse me, but His Satanic Majesty. But tell them to beware. Let them try not to discover what I am, for it would be better for if they were never born than to incur the wrath of the Axeman. I do not think there is any need of such warning, for I feel sure that the police will always dodge me as they have done in the past. They are wise and know how to keep away from all harm. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think of me as the most horrible murderer, which I am, but I could be much worse if I wanted to. If I wish, I could pay you a visit at your city every night. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, and the worst, for I am in a close relationship with the Angel of Death. To be exact, at 12:15 earthly time on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I'm very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I had just mentioned. If anyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much better for you people. One thing is certain, that is some of you people who do not jazz it out on a specific Tuesday night, if there will be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Tartarus, and as about time I leave your earthly home, I will cease my discourse. Hoping that thou wilt publish this, that it may go well for thee. I have been, I am, and will be the worst spirit to ever have existed either in fact, realm, or fantasy. Signed, the Axeman. This is Kimberly.
And I'm Kristen, and welcome to the Murder and Myths podcast, episode 3, The Music Lived On.
In May 1918, Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine lay sleeping in their apartment above their grocery store. The killer snuck in and ran a razor across their necks and bashed their heads in with an axe. Joseph died shortly after being discovered by his brothers, and Catherine died prior to their arrival. Her throat was cut so deep that her head was almost severed from her body. Law enforcement found bloody clothing at the scene, and a straight razor was found in the neighbor's lawn. Police ruled out robbery since no money or valuables were taken. Near the home they found the words scrawled on the wall, "Miss Joseph Maggio will sit up tonight. Just right, Miss Tony." The Axeman over the next year would terrorize the city of New Orleans. The axes were all owned by the victims, and he would gain entry of the houses by using a chisel to remove a panel of the back doors and enter. Some possible motives of the Axeman were that the majority of the victims were Italian immigrants or Italian Americans, and led some to believe that this might have been what we call now a hate crime. Others stated it was sexual, and that he was only looking for female victims. And the less plausible theory was it was to promote jazz music. Authorities began to look into other cases and found that there was 3 murders that had taken place in 1911 with similar MOs to the Maggio attack. These murders also had used an axe, and a small panel of the door had been removed with a chisel to gain access. In the early morning hours of June 27, 1918, a bakery truck driver making a delivery to a local grocery store discovered its owner, Louis Bessemer, and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, lying in a pool of blood in an apartment attached to the back of the store. Louis had been struck with an axe above his right temple, causing a skull fracture, and Harriet over the left ear. When police arrived, the couple was unconscious, and the axe, which belonged to Louis, was found in the bathroom of the apartment. Even though the couple was badly injured, they survived. The crime made newspapers, but it was overshadowed by the fact that there was a mistress scandal. Harriet gave a bunch of false statements and listed a bunch of suspects. All the suspects were arrested and shortly released because they had solid alibis or the police had lack of evidence. The police then turned to Louis because they found a bunch of letters in various languages in his home and suspected him to be a German spy. He was arrested, but then shortly released due to shoddy police work. Harriet's face ended up being partially paralyzed and had surgery to correct it. Harriet and Louis's relationship became a huge media scandal since they were not married, and when he went to visit her in the hospital, he was denied entrance due to the media attention. On top of that, his wife arrived, which added more fuel to the fire. Harriet was very vocal about her dislike for the police and would not help in the investigation further. 2 days after her surgery, Harriet passed away. Before she passed, she said she had suspected that Louis Bremer attacked her. Louis was charged with murder and served 9 months in prison before being acquitted in 1919. On August 5th, another attack happened in the evening. Miss Anna Schneider, who was 8 months pregnant, awoke to a dark figure above her and began to bash her face in repeatedly. Shortly after midnight, her husband arrived home from work and found her in bed with her scalp cut open and her face completely covered in blood. She survived the attack and gave birth to a healthy baby girl 2 days later. One man was arrested for the crime but released due to lack of evidence. Investigators began to realize that there is a link to these crimes. 5 days later, an elderly grocer named Joseph Romano was attacked on August 10th. He lived with his 2 nieces who had been awoken by the noise coming from their uncle's room. When they entered the room, they found that their uncle had a head wound and was bleeding heavily. The assailant was fleeing the scene as they entered. They described the man as heavy-set and dark-skinned, wearing dark clothing and a hat. Romano had been taken to the hospital, but died 2 days later due to the severity of the head wound. All the same clues were left behind in the attacks. All the homes had been ransacked, but nothing was stolen. The killer used the owner's own hatchets and then ditched them close to the homes. Panels of the doors or windows were chiseled open just enough for someone to slip through, and the majority of the victims were Italian descent. The murder and assaults caused panic in the city of New Orleans. The police became inundated with reports of people seeing the axemen hiding in the streets, or axes and chisels found in backyards, and reports that doors and windows had been tampered. People began to carry guns, and families would take turns staying up at night. A retired detective named John D'Antonio made statements that he believed the same man who was the Axeman was the same person who committed a series of murders in 1911. There were similarities in the case in which the homicides had been committed. He made a statement that the person who committed these crimes was a real-life Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, since they could likely be a law-abiding citizen who was overcome often with the urge to kill. Months of fear swept the city, and in March 1919, the Axemen struck again. This time, Charles and Rosie and their 2-year-old daughter Mary, who resided in the town of Gretna across from the Mississippi River from New Orleans, were attacked. Rosie had awakened to find her husband wrestling with a large man holding an axe. Her husband fell, succumbing to a blow to the head, which resulted in a skull fracture. The Axeman then turned his attention to Rosie and Mary and came down on them with the axe. Their neighbor heard screaming coming from the Cortinagila house, and when he entered the home, he found Rosie cradling her dead daughter as she bled from her own head wound, and her husband laid unconscious. Both Rosie and Charles survived their attack. Rosie accused the neighbor who found them, Lorlando Giordano, and his son Frank of the crimes, even though Giordano had been too sick to have committed the crimes and Frank would have been too big to fit through the back door, weighing over 200 pounds. Charles insisted his wife's claims were false, but Lorlando and Frank were arrested. Lorlando was sentenced to life in prison and Frank to hang. After the trial, Charles divorced his wife. A year later, Rosie had retracted her claim that Lorlando and Frank attacked her family, and she falsely accused the two, and they were released. The letter I read in the intro was released on March 19th in the local press. In order to avoid being killed, the entire town flooded the streets with jazz. Dance halls were filled, music flowed out of houses, and jazz bands played in the street. No one was killed that night, as promised. For several months, everything seemed quiet and the city of New Orleans started to feel at ease. Then on the night of August 10th, 1919, Steve Boca, another grocer, was attacked in his bedroom as he slept. Boca awoke to a figure looming over him and then was struck by an axe. He was conscious enough to make it to his neighbor's house and was treated for his wounds at the local hospital. Just like before, nothing was taken from the home and a panel on the back door had been chiseled away. September 2nd, a local druggist, William Carson, escaped the Axeman and even fired off several shots at the intruder. The killer left a broken door and an axe behind. The following night, a young girl named Sarah Lawman was attacked with an axe as she slept in her locked home. She had lived alone, and the neighbors would routinely come check on her. When they arrived to her home, they found that she was unconscious in her bed, suffering from a severe head wound and missing several teeth. She survived the attack. Authorities found a bloody axe on the front lawn. Once again, the city was in hysterics, and then on October 27th, Mike Pepitone was slain in his bed by the Axemen. The blood spatter covered the room entirely, covering most of the paintings and personal belongings. He left behind a wife and 6 children. The Axeman killed a total of 6 people and was never caught or identified. His crime stopped as mysteriously as they had started.
Could it be possible that the Axeman, claiming to be a music-loving resident of the realm of Tartarus, may have been influenced by another mortal traveling through the Greek underworld? Orpheus was a mortal man who was so skilled at playing the lyre that it was said he even surpassed the god Apollo in skill. He composed songs so beautiful that leopards stopped their killings, waterfalls forgot to flow, and nightingales became silent as their own cadence could not compare to his. Orpheus was very much in love with a woman named Eurydice, and he sang songs of her beauty, and he fulfilled his wish of making her his wife. The two of them looked forward to many happy years together. Eurydice decided to take an early morning walk through a meadow filled with flowers. It was a serene and beautiful morning, and she hummed a sweet song she had learned from Orpheus while she walked barefoot through the peaceful veldt. The perfect morning was marred by a serpent waking at her movement and plunging its poisonous fangs into Eurydice's ankle. She fell into the grass, her body still. It was in this spot that Orpheus found her dead body. He was completely overwhelmed with sorrow at the loss of his love, and he began mindlessly wandering the earth, singing songs of sadness and heartbreak, trying to overcome his grief. His travels, unfortunately, did nothing to ease the agony he was feeling, until his mind finally settled on a solution. He would travel to the land of the dead and bring back his beloved to the realm of the living. Orpheus found a cave and crawled through its mouth and down the passage which led him to the banks of the river Styx. There he asked the ferryman Charon to take him across. Charon replied that he was instructed by Hercules not to allow a living soul onto his boat, and while he saw that Orpheus's need to be reunited with his wife was great, he had to refuse the request. Orpheus took out his lyre and played the loveliest melody for Charon. It was as if the ferryman had become enchanted by the tune, and he did not try to stop Orpheus as he boarded the boat. Charon pushed off from the shore and paddled across the river. On the other side stood the three-headed dog Cerberus, who guarded the gates of the underworld. At the approach of the mortal, Cerberus made a wild barking noise. His lips curled back from his teeth, and he poised to leap at Orpheus. Unafraid, Orpheus continued to play, and soon the song from his lyre pacified the hellhound and transformed the beast into a tamed dog. As he walked through the realm of the dead, the spirits of the deceased began to follow him, his melodies reminding them of forgotten sorrows. Orpheus continued to play as he made his way deeper into the underworld. He came across Sisyphus, who had been condemned to roll a heavy stone up a hill for all eternity. He stopped his fruitless labor for a moment to enjoy the exquisiteness of the song being played. Tantalus, forever trying to quell his hunger with fruit he could not reach and quench his thirst from a pool whose water would always recede from him, forgot for a moment his deprivation and felt nourished by the music that Orpheus played. Even Ixion's ever-burning wheel stopped in the face of Orpheus's melody. Finally, Orpheus came upon the palace of Hades and Persephone, the king and queen of the underworld. Before either of them could deliver an order for this living mortal to leave their realm, the song issuing forth from Orpheus's lyre gave them pause. Hades began to weep, and Persephone's heart felt warm for the first time since she entered the underworld. They both agreed that they could not refuse Orpheus's request to be reunited with his wife, and they summoned Eurydice, and the two fell into each other's arms immediately. Hades summoned the three fates who spin the thread of life, measure its length, and cuts it at the end. He bid the third fate to find the cut thread and repair it, thus restoring life to Eurydice. Now, Hades agreed that he would let Eurydice follow Orpheus to the world of the living, only if he did not look behind him on their way back until the light of the sun shone fully on his face. Orpheus agreed, and Charon ferried them back across the river Styx, and they walked through the passageway. He was so filled with joy at being reunited with his love that when they were close to the mouth of the cave, he shouted back to Eurydice that he could see the daylight ahead. She must not have heard him because she didn't respond. Worried that she may not be following him, Orpheus turned back to make sure she was still behind. Hades' stipulation being broken, Orpheus caught one last glimpse of Eurydice before she was swallowed up by the darkness. This time, the gods did not let Orpheus back into the underworld, no matter how beautifully he played, and he walked the earth alone, singing his sad songs, longing for the time when he would be reunited with Eurydice. Stay tuned, because after this quick break, Kim and I will discuss the stories we just told in our reaction segment.
Hey, this is Heath.
And this is Daphne,
And we're the hosts of Going West, a true crime podcast.
where we discuss various murders, disappearances, and serial killers.
Each week, we go into the gory details of a new case.
Like episode 5, which is about Dorothy Jane Scott, a single mother who was receiving threatening phone calls by a stalker and then mysteriously disappeared.
Or the terrifying case of Dayton Leroy Rogers, the most prolific serial killer in Oregon history.
You can find us on our Instagram at Going West Podcast, or check out our website, goingwestpodcast.com.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, and Spotify.
So make sure to check out our episodes and leave a review.
Everybody in the world, keep it real and stay weird.
Cheerio.
right. Well, so now we've discussed the Axemen of New Orleans and your story, whose every name I forgot.
Oh, that's because, we're not used to saying Greek names. But the story of Orpheus and Eurydice and their trip to the underworld.
And this is how we're going to start it. It's like every time we do a reaction, we forget literally the names of everything that we've done.
Yes.
Like, how long did it take us to get this title right?
The music lived on. I still don't know if that's right or not.
Oh my God.
It is. It's right there on the screen.
It is on the script. See, we're getting the hang of this.
Yes, I agree. Well, so this week's stories, the Axeman of New Orleans.
Yes. I don't know why, but for me it was really hard to say Orleans. I don't know if it was like
New Orleans.
Or Narlands or I don't know. I guess it just depends. But yes, I discussed the Axeman, mystery of who the man may be. Before we started talking, I showed Kristen this creepy photo of, they may have like caught him on, a photo in 1919.
It's super creepy. I did not want to see it.
I'll post it we got to post it on we'll post it on the website.
Yeah.
But basically it looks like a guy walking up a stairwell holding an axe.
And it's the appropriate amount of creepy blurry that you would expect from a serial killer spooky.
Well, and the thing was that was interesting about that was that there was like an obvious MO to the case. The guy, Kristen and I were talking about like how he removed the panels out of the door, and we're thinking if it's a standard, you have those little edges in your doors, and even if you took out like the lower half and made a square, hypothetically, and were to crawl through, you'd have to, in order to like hunch down, crawl in, or lean down and crawl in, I would think you'd have to be relatively small in stature. I know for like myself, clumsy, I would have to like crawl through it like a baby. And so I just, there was some precision there.
Yeah.
It's clever to remove a panel. It must have been a very common door type of the area.
Right.
The fact that all this happened relatively around the same time caused enough fear in the town. I like the theories, of course, was it a hate crime? Mm-hmm. Was it, my favorite theory, to promote jazz music?
I loved that. But what I question about that, or what kind of that brought up to my mind, is we have the letter that was sent and printed in all of the press.
Yes.
But in anywhere else other than that letter, is there a link to jazz with these murders, with these killings?
No, I like the thing. It would be interesting to say like, okay, yeah, they worked in jazz places. Yeah, they were jazz singers. Yes, but if you think
grocers.
about, they all owned, grocery businesses, and they didn't really have a link that I read to jazz, other than I would think in that area of the U.S., I think that type of music is popular, and
especially at that time.
Yeah, and I know like jazz, it seems like, was the gangster rap of the the Prohibition era. Right. It was just like, ooh, liquor and jazz, and you just didn't. I don't know. It just sultry, or you know what I mean. Like it brought up a different genre. I just kind of thought that was funny, because I'm like, maybe this letter wasn't even the killer that wrote it. Maybe it was just like some pretty like savvy like jazz promoter that's like, oh, there's all these murders going around, let me write this letter to the newspaper, see if I can get them to publish it, and then I will book all of my jazz bands for the night to all these rich people that don't want to be murdered by an axe murder. Like, was it just it was like a big like company ploy?
Yeah, it was like, was this just someone saw a good opportunity that this brutal axe murderer gave them to book some jazz bands?
See, that would be really interesting to get people like into the music. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like there wasn't like the posting of the artist on the lamp pole, or like the telephone pole at the time. It was just interesting because apparently another thing I didn't get to mention was the note that they had scrawled that Miss Maggio will sit up tonight like Miss Tony. I guess there was a bunch of murders that had happened between Texas and Louisiana at the time that had the same MOs. There were about 49 killings of the same type of acts, the middle of the night, door panel, whole thing. The interesting thing about the Miss Tony connection was that the last victim that they had was a gentleman with the last name Tony. So it was like the murders had stopped for some time, started up again, and like, hey, just in case you forgot about me, don't forget about Miss Tony. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. They don't have, I couldn't find any recent evidence that they've looked into this more. It's almost like one of those folklore. It's folklore. It's almost like folklore, but it did actually happen. There were actually victims. There were, like these things happened. Yeah. And what was the thing that always cracks me up reading these older timey stories, if you will, or you have accounts, is the fact that they always use the word. The word had meaning. Like, I am going to testify that Kristen committed this crime and my word is golden. And they would like arrest.
I'd be arrested. Like, let's just be real.
Well, and that's the thing. They had the one lady, who was it? Rosie?
Yes.
Rosie. And Charles, like, she was going on, it was this person. No, wait, it was this person, and it was this. And they were arresting them.
Is she the one that accused Lorlando Giordano?
Yes.
Yeah, I like to think that she, like, just didn't like her neighbors. Like, maybe their dog kept shitting on their lawn, and she's just like, Mr. Burns' fingers, like,
you know what, though? It's funny, because it's one of those things, too, where it's like, it's so far away from, he's a witch, that, like, they couldn't just, like, accuse you of being a witch and then get rid of you. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that she was falsely I don't know. Yes, she was falsely accusing people, but...
she herself retracted the statement. She absolutely was falsely accusing.
Like, years later. And, I mean, she's, like, ruining lives, essentially. People are getting arrested. Well, they're getting their names in the paper. I mean,
one of them, I can't remember if it was Lorlando or it was the other one whose name is just escaping me at the moment, but one of them was sentenced to hang.
Yeah.
And it's like, she luckily retracted her statement. I would like to think, like, in the 11th hour, like, just in time to keep him from being hung.
What is that, like, the warden's pardon? Or,
yeah, exactly. She's like, oh, maybe I don't want this guy's death on my conscience. I was JK. I did it. The only thing she got out of all this was a divorce. Her husband was like, done. Yeah.
I mean, think about it. I mean, it's all over the paper probably. I mean, I don't know how small of a town per se, like, community it is where they know everybody, but...
Well, and he even said to the cops that his wife was lying. Like, before the divorce. Like, I think he's just like, she's lying. She's a liar. This didn't happen. And she's just like, I'm sticking to this story. I'm going for gold here.
Yeah, I don't know. It was interesting that I think they finally, you can't just accuse a bunch of people now. I think there needs to be some evidence and some...
Right. There's some investigation work that happens with the cops where it's just like, I don't know if maybe it was just... I mean, you even talked about it in the story, like, the city is in hysterics over these murders and these killings that are happening, that it's almost like the cops just needed to arrest someone to make the town feel safe.
Like they were actively working the case or something.
Yeah, and it was just like, she's accusing them, let's arrest them, let's put them in jail, let's get them convicted, just even if they're not the actual killers, just so things can die down, like this mass hysteria. I mean, you said people were walking around with guns. I mean, that's just asking for that state of fear. People have armed themselves. I mean, you're just innocent bystanders are going to get shot. People are going to shoot people like, oh no, I was just taking my garbage out in the middle of the night. This wasn't an axe in my hand, and now I've got a bullet in my shoulder.
Well, and the fact that families were staying up in shifts, right? It's just... there wasn't like they had, the next door app where they're like, heard a noise in the yard, like anyone else having problems, there wasn't, you didn't have the, technology to do that. I mean, you did what you did to protect your house, but it was just like, it was interesting that it was a certain, it was Italian Americans that were getting attacked, or Italian immigrants.
For the most part.
The fact that it was all the same MO. The fact that they were so deeply personal, I find that, like, anything that has to do with, like, the face, the head, that is, like, I don't hate saying the word intimate, but it's
Right.
like, it's personal. Like, it's, you're hurting, you're disfiguring the one thing that people look at every
It's their
day.
identity. It really
It's like
is.
they're taking it away, but I think it's that interesting thing of like taking away the identity, the Axeman not having an identity, trying to find an identity, if that makes sense,
Right.
and then it was just like throat cutting so deep that like it was almost to the I mean that's not just like a single necessarily. I mean that's
some strength.
That's
And I really think there's like this interesting juxtaposition between, like we mentioned earlier, with what the physical size of someone would need to be in order to comfortably be able to remove a panel from a door and gain entry to a house that way, versus the complete opposite of that, of what you would think about the size of someone that would have that physical strength in order to slice someone's throat deep enough that it would almost decapitate them, or just scalping them, that it's almost, are there two people? Or, you know, he talks about if the letter was actually written by this guy, you know, person, whatever, he basically says he's a demon, which this plays
like
into like that folklore a little bit. I mean, like if you think about just actually what happened during those crimes, either you have a really little dude or lady, I don't know, I don't want to,
person,
we don't person, know. You know, that is able to summon this type of strength.
Well, if we think about it in that aspect too, like if you've ever chopped wood, you know, it's like axe getting into something is going to stick. Yeah. Having to pull out that pressure and then going back, you know, I mean, it does take a little bit of effort. Yeah. But it's just the fact that it was so quick even, and then in and out, and then just leaving that weapon right there in the, like, what was it, in the bathroom, on the lawn. I mean, it was just I don't know if we were talking about this before we started recording of like how common it was to have just an axe at the house, and like you had mentioned, you know, probably using wood and that kind of thing isn't uncommon. It's like a common household item at the time.
Yeah. You know, you're thinking like this is the 20s. You're not having like central heating and air necessarily.
Wood burning stoves.
Wood burning stoves. I think, you know, that's where I think it was probably pretty common at that time for people to, as you know, just to have an axe in the household. And
it's interesting too, because I know this guy, you know, person, the Axeman, was also, they had a spot on the American Horror Story Coven.
Yes.
He was a character in that. They had given him an identity in that. And I mean, it does turn into folklore. You know, it's like, you know, oh, remember that time we had the Axeman? And, you know, and it just like over generations and generations, it just happened in such a weird, short little period of time, really. And then it just completely made this town freak out. Yeah. And then it just went away. And it's hard to think like it just goes away. Like you would think it, I don't know.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, they usually say that like those type of killers, you know, they don't stop. You know, it's not like something just switches off in their brain and they don't feel this compulsion and this need to do this again. And you even saw like those killings were sometimes just like days apart. So he's in this cycle of just needing to fulfill this need to murder and brutalize these people. And I do think it was pretty interesting that it just stopped. It went away. And it's like, did he move to another area? Especially, you know, talking about how there was some killings in Texas that matched this MO earlier, and then it's okay, now we're New Orleans and all of these killings are matching the MO. Like maybe something happened later in a different period of time and it just hasn't been related, or he changed his MO enough that they're not linked or related. I don't know, it's just it's interesting to think about, like, it just stopping. Like, did he die? Yeah, who knows?
That's the thing. Like, who knows? Did he get arrested for another crime? Did he get put in jail for? Right. I mean, it would be interesting to look into the Texas murders a little bit and see when those started, because if it was only in the early 1900s, then it just stops. Like you said, they don't. I'd like to think they move on. You know, I mean, to go on to different things, but again, like, during that era, there wasn't, you know, a lot of communication necessarily linking crimes, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like
there's not a
there's
national
not a
database.
There's not a
back then.
fingerprinting.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they did that all by hand. No pun intended, but they like, you know,
Yeah.
it was interesting. I don't know. I think there's not even like a speculation on who they could be. Like when we
Right.
have Jack the Ripper, where there was like, it's, you know, they have an idea
They
of who
have
it was,
some,
and
yeah.
they kind of have other ideas. You know, they didn't even, from things I saw. And if you guys read or heard anything about who they think it is,
Let us know.
let us know, because I'm curious, because I couldn't find anything when I searched on it. But
Yeah, I do like how you kind of pointed out that, you know, the identity aspect of it. He didn't have an identity.
No.
He's taking an axe to these people's
Yeah.
face. That was not something that I had really thought of prior as kind of like a maybe a subconscious motive that was happening there.
it's like that thing psychologically, and again, I always have to preface, like, we don't have a psychiatry
Right.
background or anything, but it's like that whole thing of being in a mental state where you don't feel like you have an identity or a place or something, and then his victims, again, taking those identities with him, almost like
Right.
absorbing them and taking them to where he feels he's in a hell,
Yeah.
is kind of again, it's an intimate type of killing, even, you know, and it just, I think
It's kind of dark.
it is dark.
It is dark.
But that's, I don't know, that's the unfortunate nature of
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
And they just didn't, it would be interesting if anything ever came up, you know, in the future.
In the
but
future, yeah.
Well, it's still like, it, you know, people still talk about it. I've heard this covered on other podcasts, and it'll be interesting. I think what's interesting about doing true crime podcasts in general is it is keeping these stories alive. It
Right.
is piquing interest for these victims and maybe getting people talking about it, because I think it's one of those things where what is that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing where
Yeah,
it's
right.
like
6 degrees of separation.
yeah, I know that since we started this, it sparked conversations, and I'm not really going to get into it on the mic, but I've had family that have close relations to some of these,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
different things going on. And then it's like, what? And then you start talking, and you're like, someone I know that knew this person, or this happened. And, you know, and it just, you realize how, I don't want to say often these things happen,
Right.
but like, it does spark the conversation. It does get people talking. And then maybe one of those things you're like, you know what, back in this day, this, and that little bit of information could solve a case.
Yeah, it could crack the case
Could
wide
crack a
open.
case.
Yep.
Maybe something people didn't think about. So it's really interesting. The cases that we do, of course, aren't, there isn't active investigations going on
Right,
anymore.
right, yeah.
I think it's great that some podcasts are, you know, donating their money, you know, Patreon stuff to missing persons and things
Yeah.
like that. And I think that's an amazing effort. And so, you know, well, hopefully these keep talking, like keep everything going.
Exactly.
So,
I like it. I
yeah.
mean, I do think that's, and again, just kind of like how you mentioned, like we're creating the folklore.
Yeah.
People like to think of mythology or folklore as it being a very, very long time ago, and it's all in the past. And while that's true for a lot of the stories that we talk about now, it's also a living thing. The stories that we tell now will, you know, might someday become the folklore of America, might become the folklore of the world, might, you know, in 1,000 years from now, might be the mythology that, you know, future podcasters are blasting off across the galaxy. I don't know, but it is kind of interesting to kind of be a part of that, to keep these stories alive, to keep that interest going, to try to, you know, figure out what meanings they're, you know, what this means to the human condition and how it applies.
Yeah, I think again, it'll be interesting how this evolves, and maybe in all the effort, all the podcasts, and all these true crime things, like a case gets solved.
Yeah.
You know, and there is, you know, like you were saying, these are all folklores and stories and things that happen, but every story hopefully can have an ending and resolution, and the family gets some closure.
I would really like to see that. I would like to see a podcast crack open a cold case. I could just picture that Dateline episode. Keith Morrison interviewing a podcast host. It'd be kind of cool.
It'd be
kind of cool.
It would be nice. Again, closure would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's ultimately, like, we do talk about the killers, a lot. They're kind of what drive the stories, but I do think it's important, like you do. You always mention the names of the people, the murder victims, and I think that's an important thing to remember, that we don't necessarily want to glorify these murders. It's a horrible, awful thing that they did. And yeah, there's those people's stories. What did they do? I mean, beforehand, they were people, they had lives, and it's awful that it got taken in.
Yeah, we have to always remember, they, like you mentioned, they have names. It's not just so-and-so's victim, Right. Because if anything, they already took their life. Let's not take their name away.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this podcasting community carries on a little bit.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So then we kind of talked about, and in our last reaction episode, I talked about the spoiler a little bit about kind of our process. And this was the episode when Kim was doing the cold open, and he talked about his native land of Tartarus, and I'm sitting there going like, oh snap, that's where Orpheus is going to get Eurydice. Like,
I'm not gonna lie, when you said Tartarus, I don't know why, I was like, oh shit, are we in Doctor Who right now? And I was like, no, that's Tardis.
That's Tardis.
I don't think Tartarus is necessarily... Well, maybe it is bigger on the inside. I don't know. Can't say.
I mean, I've never been there. I've not myself traveled to the underworld.
Oh. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I thought that's what this was.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool to hear that at part of the cold open from Kim, and then to talk about a little bit of again, I had really no idea like who the Axeman was, what the deal was. Like, I knew again it was the Axeman, and that it had to do with music. Those were the two things that I got to know before I started going, okay, what myth am I going to tell? And I did do something that I didn't think I was going to do this early in the podcast, which was delve into the Greek mythology. I mean, Greek and Roman mythology is what we would consider classical mythology. It has been covered and covered and covered and covered and covered. And when you say mythology, I mean, just Google like a mythology search, and most of the results that you're going to have come up are Greek or Roman, just because the literature is just so expansive there. So
I think the one thing that's also people don't know is there is a difference between mythology and folklore. There is distinction between the two that I think it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think for the purposes of our podcast, at least in my mind, like, yes, it's murder and myths.
Yeah.
I will touch on folklore. It will not be strictly mythology. It will kind of blend that line a little bit into folklore, just because there are some episodes where it's just like, I want to cover some of the folklore, and I think it fits with maybe the murder or the case that's going on. But yeah, so this one was, I knew it was music. I knew it had a murder.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler, shit. Knew it was music, knew it was a murder, and I mean, really kind of the first thing that I thought of was, Orpheus and his lyre. When you think of mythology and you think of music, for me, and again, not wanting to delve into Norse mythology so soon again, that's really where I was just like, that's where I want to go. We've got to talk about Orpheus and his trip to the underworld to save Eurydice.
I think the one thing to preface also about the theme in this episode, we keep saying it, music, is I have a very, like, for me, I'm very connected to music. I listen to a variety of things, but I can cry at a song.
Right.
I can, most music is always in the background of my life somewhere. And music has a way to bring you places. It has a way to make you remember things. And I think it has such a power over us that when I was listening to your story, it's the ending. It gets me every time.
Oh, jeez.
Like, I didn't have cries in my eyes or anything, but like, Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about yours and then we'll get there, like, yeah, by all means.
I mean, we can jump to the end. I'm assuming no one jumped ahead and skipped the murder and myth and came right to the reaction. If you did, go back. This will make a whole lot more sense.
Because I'm going to ruin it for you right there.
But yeah, Eurydice at the end where, Orpheus is given very clear instructions from Hades, like, you shouldn't be here for starters. The land of the dead is really never a place for someone who is living. It's always very perilous for them to be there, and it's just bad. And so he's, again, that music, just that move, that emotional connection, that it just overcame everything that Hades and Persephone knew should happen.
And that's my other thing I was going to ask you, because again, I'm learning too. Does Hades feel the emotions of all the people with him, like the people that have passed? Like, can he feel like the sorrow, the sadness, or you know what I mean, like the last moments? Do they ever mention that?
For the most part, I don't think it seemed like it's a very, I don't want to say it's like a very dark and gloomy, but it seems very like black and white movie-ish to me, where it's just,
because I'm wondering, like, in that aspect, like, is it just that the music was so beautiful it almost brought color to the place that made him emotion?
That's kind of how in my mind, like when I visualize this, that's kind of what I'm seeing. It's almost like that, everything's just very almost unemotional in the underworld, to a sense.
Absolutely.
It's a place of death. And in fact, I don't think that the people in the underworld are, at least in this mythology, are necessarily feeling sorrow for the most part. I mean, there are certain beings there that are having to enact certain punishments, which I think could be like an emotional response there. But for the most part, it even says, like, as Orpheus is going through, the souls of the dead start to follow him because they're remembering the sorrow that they felt. So, the fact that the music is causing them to remember, I almost tend to think of it as a place of stagnation, where everything's really still and just stagnant, and there's no evolution, you're stuck in like I would say purgatory, but it kind of is. That's kind of how I interpret it. And I think, Persephone even says that since she's come to the underworld, her heart hadn't felt warmth. And so I think that Orpheus just was able to use that music to evoke that emotional connection that we all, I think, kind of feel when we listen to music, whatever musical preference you may have, that it was just able to evoke that in everyone, and just kind of break them from that purgatory or that stagnance that they were feeling.
And that's the thing, like, I think that when he started playing the music, it's like that one song that you hear on the radio that maybe you haven't heard in a while, and you go, oh man, I remember summer of 94 when me and so X, Y, and Z, and it just like, it makes you that warm, fuzzy, like, again, you feel that warmth or that emotion of like, damn, that was, I forgot about that memory. Right. It's like, and maybe that's the same kind of response that they got from his music. Yeah. And the fact that he even was granted, you know what, we'll give you a pass. We'll let you take your love.
Yeah, we're going to let you take Eurydice.
And you would think, like, the fact that he's like, here's the circumstance. Super simple. Yeah. Do not turn around. Right. And I was like, you think about it, you're like, how hard would that be? And, And yeah, I mean, you would think that it wouldn't be that hard, but for me, it's very symbolic of a test of faith. It's how much faith do you have in Hades? Or, whatever. Someone's word.
Exactly. What is your faith in that? What stock are you going to place in that? Do you believe that this person is going to be true and honest and treat you fairly? And I think Orpheus just lacked the faith. He lacked that true conviction that when he didn't hear Eurydice call out back to him, he couldn't help it. Because he didn't have that faith, that he had to turn around and see if she was still there. Because I think he didn't want to walk out of the underworld. Like, I mean, Hades is the god of the underworld, and whatever
He
you
wasn't
may
ever going to be able to go back.
right. So you're just like wondering. I think in the back of my mind, I would be wondering, like, is this real? Did he just make this deal with me to get me as a mortal to go back to the realm of the living?
Yeah.
Is he treating me fairly? Can I trust him? I could see a little kernel of doubt being there. And again, when she didn't answer, just that overwhelming need to just check. Is she still behind me? And
He was so
because
close.
because he didn't maintain that faith, he didn't keep the faith, he didn't get to reap the reward, when in fact Hades had deserved, in this case, he deserved that faith that he was asking Orpheus to place in him.
Well, see, and that's the sad thing about it, was that was it. He had one chance.
Yep.
But if you think about like just reaction in general, how often is it that you could go anywhere and you hear someone say your name, whether it's to you or not, you're going to turn and look. I mean, it's like that weird knee-jerk reaction where he's like, you expect someone to, it's like when you're watching a TV show and you're laughing and you look over at who you're with to see if they're reacting the same way.
Exactly.
And it's like, I think it was just it was a freaking mistake.
Yeah.
And then I think it was like the second he turned around, he knew he fucked up.
Oh, he did.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And then it was just like he lived the rest of his life, Fabio-esque, whatever he was. Like, I'm assuming he was hot, like kind of a handsome dude, you know?
I mean, I don't know. It is very interesting,
I don't know.
his death. I will kind of go into that a little bit. So there's a couple of different stories about Orpheus's death. But as we know, Orpheus was as good at playing the lyre as the god Apollo. In some versions, he is the son of Apollo.
Okay.
But obviously, there's that connection with the music playing. In some versions, the lyre that he plays was given to him by Apollo. So Orpheus very much Apollo's bro. Like, they're buds, they're dudes. So he obviously is going to be giving his worship and devotion to Apollo.
Okay.
When Dionysus was kind of the more popular deity at the time. So he's a little irked by this whole thing.
Like the bromance? Like,
No, I'm the deity that you should be worshiping.
Gotcha.
So sends a bunch of muses, I guess, and basically like they tear Orpheus apart in like this orgy.
Oh my.
And yeah, they like orgy murder him. I don't know. Yeah, so that's fun, I guess. But then like his severed head and his lyre get thrown into the sea, and they float to the Isle of Lesbos, and his like decapitated head just keeps singing, and his lyre is magically playing, and he becomes an oracle.
Dude, it's like that hall of that Futurama where they put the heads in the...
Yep. So yeah, his head's just like singing until his oracle becomes more popular than Apollo's, and then Apollo's like, no, I'm putting an end to this shit.
What does he do to the head?
He just makes him stop being an oracle. I don't know exactly what happened to the head after that. Maybe it got to go be at rest with the rest of his torn up orgy body. I don't know.
I can't say that's ever been on a death certificate. Death by orgy?
Death by orgy?
I mean, sure, a quick Google search.
Right.
don't...
Someone might have had a heart attack during an orgy, but like...
They would just put cardiac arrest.
Murder during an orgy?
Well, they would be like cardiac arrest.
Right. It's funny.
Heart failure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh my.
But yeah, that is in one version. One version of how Orpheus dies.
They didn't even do like the keys in the bowl thing. They just like knew what was going on, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, and how deceptive is that to just be like, you're not worshiping me enough. I know.
I'm gonna send these.
Let me send these ladies. So I don't know. He might have been hot.
I don't know why I automatically thought of Fabio. Like, who does that in 2019?
Don't know.
Like, how'd you believe it's not butter? He was that guy. Wasn't he in that butter thing?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I know who he is, but I mean...
That's the, like, I'm going to be real honest. That is really the only thing I know Fabio from until we went to the book sale at the library, and Fabio wrote a book, and he, of course, his, like, flowy hair... body was emblazoned on the cover. I can only assume it was a romance book. I do regret not buying it now. But
you bought it. Did you go back and buy it?
I did not go back and buy it.
Oh.
No.
Would you tell me if you did?
Yeah, for sure. I'd go get it right now.
So
take a picture and put it on the podcast.
I'm just going to go ahead and Google this right now while we're talking. So Fabio, I know him because my sister, older sister at the time, was one of those romance novellas fans.
Oh, jeez. No,
so
you.
Fabio, see, look, he has graced the covers.
That's the book.
Yeah,
that's the exact book.
No,
right
I know,
there.
but like he is the model for all of those romance novels with the long hair.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, he's on all of them.
So I don't know, maybe
like Fabio.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna Colonel Sanders.
Okay, you know what? I'm putting that on the website.
Yeah.
We found that Colonel Sanders novella.
Wow.
Anyway,
for the next episode,
people like the chicken.
I think that's kind of funny that your mental image of. I mean, just think about it.
But
it's like a Greek. You know, you always think of the Greek gods, and this god's
Fabio
like playing a liar, and he's really fucking good at it. Yeah,
And I automatically assume it's just Fabio.
It's Fabio. That's fine.
I mean, his shirt is always undone and all those stuff. It's like the shirts blow off.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's like they... Fabio, I don't
This reaction segment took a turn.
It took a turn.
Yeah. So...
He's not Fabio.
He's not Fabio. He may or may not be the son of Apollo. He may or may not be the son of one of the other muses, Calliope.
He may or may not have a head in the Futurama Museum.
He may or may not. I don't know. I don't watch enough Futurama to say that. But
how dare you?
I said enough Futurama, not no Futurama.
We can all just talk about like if you watch it, you know when I say the Fry's dog episode. However, you just got really. Oh God, she's got cries in her eyes already. You can just bring that up. Because
we are approaching the anniversary of Chico's death.
No!
This is a very sensitive time for me.
Well, we're just gonna spend the rest of this segment crying about our dogs that have passed. Okay,
that's what happened.
But I mean, it's like it's a good series. You should just watch it and then skip that episode.
Right? Yeah. No.
Everyone does.
Yes. But yeah, so that's kind of like, you know, after his death, or you know, after he can't go back.
Yeah.
Because he does try. He tries to go back into the underworld, and Hades is like, "Fuck you, dude."
He's all middle finger.
Like, what did I tell you?
Bony.
I let you come in here. And I mean, the Fates don't do that. The Fates don't fix people's threads. It's not a thing that's done. And Hades is like, yeah, we'll fix her thread. We'll let her go back into the world of the living. And he fucked up. I mean, like,
are you ever going to talk about the three Fates? I love them. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, we might.
I forget their names, but I know there was three. There was one that wove the fabric, one that sewed it, and one that cut it. Yeah.
It's very possible because, again, like I don't. Even though Greek and Roman mythology is like the classical, like everyone should know it, I don't know a whole lot about Greek and Roman mythology. But I know a little bit about the Fates. And in Norse mythology, there is also three women.
God, are they rock goddesses like this guy?
No, I don't think they have any connection to music, at least not that I know of. But yeah, there's three Fates in Norse mythology too that play a similar-ish role. So I if I can't come across the time to talk about it in a regular podcast, it might be something I discuss on an extended myths episode. I do imagine I will talk about the Norse Fates at some point.
That'll
in
be
time.
cool. We have a lot to go through.
There's a lot of mythology.
This is the thing. Like it goes down the rabbit hole as you start talking about it.
Now what?
You don't have a newspapers.com for myths.
No, there is not a newspapers.com for myths. It's called a library.
Huh? No, just kidding. That's why you do your segment and I do mine.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I really wanted to kind of talk about in the myth was, again, how it's kind of like a stagnant place, and we get to see some of the different characters, kind of the big named characters from Greek mythology that are in Tantalus, that are kind of going through, like, oh, I'm lifting this rock up this hill for all eternity. This really sucks. And then it's like, oh, this music, I paused for a moment to listen to this music. And for me, that was it's a very powerful kind of thing. Just even back then, there was this understanding of that emotional connection with song.
So if you were in the underworld and you were, like you said, the guy pushing the rock for all eternity, like, what would be your thing you would be stuck doing for all eternity? Like, what would be the one thing?
Man, that's a really good question.
Mine would be easy open tabs.
Yours would be easy open tabs. Mine would be endlessly carrying a bowl of soup from a microwave to a table, because anyone who's known me for any period of time knows I'm pretty much incapable of doing that. Sometimes the soup explodes in the microwave and I've got a big mess there. Sometimes I burn my hand getting the soup out of the microwave. Sometimes I spill soup all over myself. I've burned the crap out of my leg one time on the patio at my old place of employment, because I was just about to put the soup on the table and missed the table, and soup all down my legs, scrub pants, just covered in soup.
Why don't you do like a mug?
I've done that.
Do you do the wet paper towel while you heat it in the microwave?
I've done that.
What?
It's like a curse.
So that's your thing. Handling soup
in the underworld for all eternity, because it would just be me endlessly burning or spilling or fumbling about and never getting to eat the soup.
And I'll be the one trying to open up your seasoning packet and can't do it, because no matter what type of easy open tab, whether it's perforated, has the notch, can't freaking do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like I will sit there and struggle with it so much that I it's like I don't want to put it in my mouth and tear it. And that sounds weird, but
right.
So I'm like fiddling, and finally just like either give up and don't use whatever.
Or I come open it for you.
You open it for me, or I'm like, scissors, anyone have scissors? I need to open this packet. And they're like, and then you see that the top of it's all completely ruined. Like, that would be my personal thing. I don't know. I guess you can leave your thing on our Twitter.
Please,
like, I'm curious to know what you think
would
be your underworld.
Yeah, what would be your underworld punishment?
What would be your underworld punishment?
That would be interesting to know. And what song would make you pause and forget what your underworld punishment was for a moment?
Ooh, that's a good one. Maybe you should put elevator music here and let us think about that for a minute.
I could do that.
Okay, Kristen, elevator music.
Okay, we're back. We had to think about this for a little bit, because I think,
long enough to like not keep you guys just hanging there for a minute.
Right.
Okay, so go ahead, Kristen. What would be your song?
I'm gonna go with mine. Which
Okay, go ahead.
Yours. I know what yours is.
You know what it is?
I don't know what you're going to say in the last minute, but I think I know what yours is. And I think that that song would equally affect me as well. But I think the one song that I would just be like, and this is going to be like really lame. But there's a story behind it. So I think my song that I would be like, I'm not even going to open the microwave for this soup just yet, would be American Pie by Don McLean. Because
I'm gonna go ahead and exit this room.
Because
that's interesting.
There's my reason behind it is, spoiler alert, guys. My dad passed away a number of years ago, and my dad, with the exception of him, was probably my best friend in the entire world. I mean, we had a really just awesome, cool relationship, not just as father and daughter, but like we got to relate as just people. But he would, whenever my mom would have to go out of town for business, my dad would pull my sister and I out of school. And we would take a road trip up to Circus in Reno.
Stop it.
Where he would go play cards, and we'd just, he'd give us some money to go mess around in the arcade carnival area, whatever you call it. And we had a CD, was a tape, and then became a CD that we would listen to whenever we took those road trips. And the first song on it was American Pie by Don McLean. And we were not like a family that would sing in the car.
Yeah.
But that song was kind of the exception to that. I think it was probably the first song that I knew all of the words to.
I remember the cover of that album.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was like the American flag and like I remember that.
So I think that's the song that any day, like it took me a long time after my dad passed away before I could listen to that song all the way through. Wow. It was one of those, like, it would come on and I would have to immediately change the station. Like, I can't hear American Pie. I'm at the point now where it's just like, yeah, I'll hear it. I'll sing along in the car with it.
It's memories, great. But the memories come back.
But the memories come back. And it's, it's that's the healing has kind of happened. Yeah. And now you can just, it's not necessarily the sad part, oh, my dad's gone, but it's like that,
the music
lived on. So that would be my song that I would just be like, oh God, what's happening? I'm in the underworld and there's soup spilling everywhere, but I don't care because I'm just going to belt out Drive Your Chevy to the Levee.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Mine's Wannabe by Spice Girls.
That was not the song that I thought you were going to say.
I'm just kidding. As much as I'd love to party it up with them in the underworld, it's what? Yeah, I mean, it would. I think they'd be fun people to hang out with. No, it is Muzzle by Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah. Like, I think we all, not we all, she knows that, but that was like, God, okay, I'm not even going to date myself. Not even going to date myself here. It was like the one song that always came on when something was ending in my life, like high school, friendships, moving out of Southern California,
breaking up with my high school boyfriend.
Yeah. I mean, it was always that one thing, but the line where it's like, my life, is extraordinary, right? Blessed and cursed in one, is like, you have to remember that all these things have happened, but you are still amazing. Yeah. I know I'm all, here we go, be positive, but it's true. It is. And it was just like all the shit that, you go through. Again, you're gonna make it, and and if you don't need to talk to someone, like, you hope you have that somewhere. But again, the music lives on, right. To repeat our title again. But again, it's so interesting how powerful music is, right. And it's
Kim knows that I feel very similar. Like, this is one of those things where it's like, we knew we were kind of destined to be friends, because what are the chances? Like, that's both of our favorite songs.
I haven't met anyone else that was like, oh shit, Muzzle of Smashing Pumpkins, melancholy, Right. Yeah. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, let us know what your Tartarus punishment would be in the underworld. What would you be stuck doing forever and never being able to accomplish? And what would be the song that would make you pause?
Yeah, I'm curious to know. Like, if you leave a comment, send us a DM, send us a tweet.
Thanks for listening to Murder and Myths, a bi-weekly podcast. This was episode 3, The Music Lived On.
Please review us on Apple Podcasts. The reviews and ratings help us tremendously. For the month of March, if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and email us a screenshot of the review to murderandmyths@gmail.com, you will be entered in our giveaway. One lucky reviewer will win 2 Murder and Myth themed buttons and a secret bonus prize. 2 runners-up will receive 1 button of their choice.
We recently launched a Patreon page where our supporters have access to exclusive digital content and some physical merchandise, depending on the support tier. Check it out if you want to delve further into the stories with us. There is a link on our website, murderandmyths.com. Join us in 2 weeks for episode 4, Mummy Dearest.
And as always, come for the murder.
And stay for the myths.